Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to your favorite Wednesday night show. This is the Pro American Late Model Series. Now, tonight we are here for 225 laps for the final Palms race of 2022. Of course, not the final race of the season, but after this race, we will be taking a couple of weeks off until after New Year's. So, this will officially be the final race of 2022 for this series. And, ladies and gentlemen, I think it will be a fun one. Tonight, of course, we are here at America's most famous short track, the track known as the birthplace of NASCAR stars. We are here at the Hickory Motor Speedway up in Hickory, North Carolina. This is a very short and difficult track, especially compared to some of the tracks that we have been to throughout this season. It's a bit comparable in length to what we went to for round number 3 back at the Langley Speedway. Just a little bit shorter than that, actually. Hickory Motor Speedway only comes in at 0.36 miles or 0.58 kilometers in length, so this track quite the tight little bull ring, and dare I say, smaller than the actual official track called the bull ring itself. That said, looks like cars just about ready to make their way down to the speedway for our first heat race of the evening. So, taking it down trackside, taking the pole of our qualifying here tonight and starting off in the first place for this first heat race, it's going to be last week's race winner, the number 85 Alpine Stars entry of Brandon Kiger. To his outside, another driver that has picked up a race win this season. That's the number 99 of Tyler McRae for Droppin' Bombs Racing. Back in row number 2, gonna be made up of another driver that has picked up wins this season, believe it or not. That's the 12 of Kenny Tripp for Fast Track Motorsports. Back in P number 4, the 66 of Brent Mex, a driver that showed up later on in the season, but has definitely been showing that he has a place here in this league. Back in 5th place, going to be the 55 of Albert Hewins for Moonlight Speed, with Art Hendren in the 37 to his outside, making up row number 3. Row number 4, going to go back to the 72 of Will Salamander Salamone, with Mr. Johnny B in the 26 to his outside, making up row number 4. Finally, rounding out this 9-car heat race, that is going to be the number 6 of Tommy Mitchell. 9 cars making the field for this heat race, 9 more going to be lining up for our second heat race after this. Not enough drivers to make a full field, so none of these drivers will be at risk of being eliminated from tonight's event. But either way, very important to pick up these spots for qualifying. Pace cars off, 8 laps on the board for this heat race. A green flag up in the air, and already a little bit of bumping and banging on the start-finish line there. Everyone negotiating themselves fairly well, but this is an incredibly tight little track, so everyone's going to have to fight as hard as possible, but still try and play nice. After all, you do not want any wrecked race cars. Stuck up on the high side there, that's the 37 of Art Hendren. He's going to fall back a couple of positions just like that in that number 37 machine. Even at such a small and fast track like this, being stuck up on the high side is not where you want to be. Already 2 laps in the books, these drivers setting 14-second lap times. Higher 14s, low 15s. Regardless, 225 laps for the main event may sound like a lot, but you're seeing how fast they click away here. This is an incredibly fast track, an incredibly tight one at that. And there's a spin up in... Never mind, he's going to save it. No, he's going to get loose again. He's going to save it again. That 99 of Tyler McRae. Some masterful driving on his part. It looks like he is having a whole lot of trouble up under the hood of that number 99 machine, but he managed to keep it from spinning not once, not twice, but 3 times back to back just in that lap. So that's going to check the field up just a little bit, but McRae still keeping it going strong, and he's still back in the top 3 of this race. That's at Albert Hewins. Looking down to the inside to see if he can't get around him, and it looks like trouble for Tommy Mitchell. Tommy Mitchell is around down below the apron with only 2 laps to go in this heat race. It does not look like the caution is going to come out. We're going to let this heat race play through. Brandon Kiger being scored as your race leader. Kenny Tripp just behind in that number 12, looking to see if he can't pick up the win on this heat race, but it's only going to be 2 more corners to decide the winner. It looks like Brandon Kiger going to be taking home this first heat race, followed by Tripp, McRae, Hewins, Mex, Salamone, Hendren, Johnny B, and finally Tommy Mitchell being coming home a lap down here tonight. So that will be the heat race that sets the inside line for the main event. So now going to be heading straight back down to the track for heat race number 2. No hesitation, no prep work necessary, as this is the iRacing.com platform. So pretty instantly, drivers already making their way down to the grid. So making up the heat race for heat race number 2, starting out on the pole, going to be the 45 of Mike Sukup for Dropping Bombs Racing out in the front of this heat race. It is outside the number 7 of Jeff Edgar for Fastlane Motorsports. Back in P number 3, it's going to be the points leader coming into this race. That is the 27 of Gerard Lawrence with the 63 JNS Racing entry of Joe Campbell to his outside. 5th place, going to go back to the 28 of Jason Branch, the America's Navy entry, followed by Joshua Dube in the 9 car back in P number 6. 7th place, going to go back to Jonathan Emerson in the 23, with John Friley in the 126 Camel entry, rounding out this 8-car heat race. So, like I said just a little bit earlier, not enough cars in the field to risk elimination for any of these drivers. Everyone good to go to be making the main event. The limit is 22 cars, and it looks like we have 17 registered. So, still bound to be a fun event. iRacing.com pace car be pulling itself off the speedway. Green flag back up in the air. Let's see what these drivers have to offer for each other. Mike Sukup off to a pretty solid start. A little bit of trouble back there for Jeff Edgar. He's going to slide up the speedway just a bit, but he's got everything pointed in the right direction. Side by side for Joe Campbell. Jeff Edgar scraping against the wall. He's fallen back more positions. He just can't get down onto that preferred line, and in such a short little sprint like this, that's pretty much where you need to be if you want to make passes. A little bit of a nudge between Edgar and Emerson, though. Edgar still stuck up to the high line. He has fallen down 4 positions already, looking to make it 5 as Dube tries to get around him in that number 9 machine. Not the way Edgar wanted his heat race to go. That's definitely going to sting, but still 5 laps left to go in this heat race, side by side, heading down into turn number 1. This race is not yet over. There is still time for Edgar to try and make a little bit of a pushback, but as long as he's stuck up on that high line, does not look like things are going to be working out for him. Up in the front of this race, Mike Sukup still in the lead of things in that number 45. Lawrence just behind, looking to see if he can't find any sort of way to creep down up under that Droppin' Bombs Racing entry. Lawrence does have 2 wins under his belt and finished second in last week's race, so definitely looking to try and see if he can't pick up another win and solidify his lead in the point standings just a little bit more, but he's going to have to get around Mike Sukup to do it, and so far, not having a whole lot of success. Just behind these two, Gerard Lawrence not out of the picture either. Joe Campbell not out of the picture either back in P number 3. Only 0.4 of a second between himself and the 2 leaders. Lawrence getting up close and personal with Sukup. He might be going for the pass heading down into turn number 4. Not going to happen. Mike Sukup's going to be the winner of this second heat race, followed by Lawrence, Campbell, Branch, Emerson, Dube, Friley, and Edgar, making up the outside lane for your main event here tonight. Now we're going to give these drivers just a quick little bit of time to get themselves warmed up, ready to go. Any last minute preparations that need to be done, get done. So we will be back in just a moment with the Hickory 225. Don't go anywhere, race fans. And just like that, the warm-up is over. Any last-minute adjustments made to these cars taken care of, and maybe even potentially just a little bit of a restroom break for these drivers. After all, 225 laps here at the Hickory Motor Speedway. It is a small track, one of the smallest ones we have on the schedule here this season, but that is still no laughing matter. That said, before we get this thing underway, let's head back down to the starting grid to take a quick look at our official starting lineup for this evening. So, winning the heat race here tonight, starting out on the pole, going to be the 85 Alpine Star entry of Brandon Kiger. It is outside the Droppin' Bombs racing entry. That's going to be Mike Sukup back in P number 2. Third place going to go to one of those Hale trailer drivers for Fast Track Motorsports. That's the 12 of Kenny Tripp, with Gerard Lawrence, current points leader, in the 27 to his outside. Fifth place going to go back to another Droppin' Bombs racing entry. That's the number 99 of Tyler McRae, with Joe Campbell in the 63, starting in P number 6. Row 4 going to be made up of the 55 of Albert Hewins and the 28 of Jason Branch, with the row just behind them, row number 5 being Brent Mex in the 66 and Jonathan Emerson in the 23. Back to row number 6, Will Salamander Salamone going to be rolling that 72 off in P number 11, with Joshua Dube in the 9 in P number 12. Back in the 13th position, going to be the 37 of Art Hendren, with John Friley to his outside, making up row number 7. 15th, going to go back to Mr. Johnny B in the 26, Jeff Edgar in 16th, and Tommy Mitchell rounding out this 17-car field here tonight. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car. We are going green flag racing for the Hickory Motor Speedway 225. Already everyone off to a pretty solid start, but Brandon Kiger really making that inside lane work for him on the initial start to this race. Already a bit of a battle for P number 2. Mike Sukup falling back in position, but immediately looking to see if he can't try and get around Kenny Tripp in that number 12 machine. Just behind them, side-by-side battling Joe Campbell on the inside of Gerard Lawrence. And it looks like Gerard going to very quickly follow back into the freight train, as it were. And Joe Campbell having a little bit of trouble. He actually scraped the inside wall there in that number 63. I'll tell you what though, there's fans, this was a race I was really looking forward to last week back at the Irwindale Speedway when we interviewed our top 3 finishers. All 3 of them unanimously said this is a very demanding track, a very difficult track, one that is going to be putting on some incredibly fun racing. At 63, looking to see if he can't try and find a way to nose his way around Tyler McRae. Currently, this is the battle for 4th and 5th, respectively. Everyone, for the most part, playing nice with each other for right now. After all, 225 laps is a long way for these drivers to go. No reason to be pushing your car too hard or be potentially making enemies out there on the speedway back on lap number 1. But regardless, only 7 laps in, and our first caution is going to be coming out. That is for the 7 of Jeff Edgar and the 37 of Art Hendren. It looks like Hendren is still rolling. Edgar going to have to take the tow back to pit lane. Let's take a look back here, see what happened to these 2 drivers on lap number 7 between Edgar and Hendren. Coming out of turns number 2 right here, heading into 3 and 4. So far with him looking pretty fine. Hendren gets loose and tries to correct, and just a massive impact for that number 7. Nowhere he could really go there to avoid that, and that's a hard impact, possibly race-ending damage on that number 7. Let's see if we can't get a different view here down at just what happened. Once again, head down into turn 2. You can see that 37 getting really loose, trying to save it from heading into the pit entry wall, and it just picks up the both of them. Not really anywhere either of them could go. Let's take another look back there, see if we can't ride on board with that number 7 machine, see what he saw heading into turns 3 and 4. Hendren just getting a little bit loose, He slows down just a bit, tries to go to the outside. Hendren corrects, and a massive impact into the outside wall, which is going to be what brings out our first caution back on lap number 7. So, first caution of the evening, not much of a surprise. After all, Hickory Motor Speedway, a very tiny track with some very fast drivers in some very fast race cars. Pit stops, definitely going to be a must this race. Potentially even 2 or 3. 2 generally is what the average has been throughout the season, but honestly, I would not be surprised if this might end up being a 3-stop race. Tires are a big what if. Hickory can be demanding on the tires depending on how you drive the track, but I don't think it is something that will be as much of a concern as it has been at some of the other tracks we will have been to, so definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Regardless, pace car's off. We're going green flag racing yet again. Let's see what these drivers can do on restart number 2. Joe Campbell being moved up to the high side just a bit. Definitely not the place to be, and the opposite of where he found himself on the initial restart. Gerard Lawrence was the one stuck up on the high side, getting freight trained around by a couple of cars, but Joe Campbell immediately going to move it back down. He's able to not lose too many positions on that little bit of a mistake, and now looking to see if he can't get around Mr. Mike Sukup. Not going to be able to do it in that corner, but still trying his best. You can see him poking his nose down there, really just waiting for the right time to strike in that number 63 machine. A little bit further back, though, battles breaking out. Contact between mechs, and I believe that's the 23 of Emerson that had just a little bit of a tap there. That's going to be sending him up way to the outside and cause him to lose a couple of positions. Dude going to get past him. Salomon going to get past him, and Tyler McRae pulling up alongside him. McRae looking to try and get the pass off as well. McRae having a bit of trouble in that dropping bombs entry in his heat race. He was looking extremely loose off the corners. Did not have any sort of incident, but it looked like he was having a bit of trouble holding onto that late model and keeping the rear end planted on the ground below him. But looking at him now, it looks like he has that car under control. He might use that warm-up to make a little bit of the tweak to his setup, but right now everything is looking a-okay for that number 99 machine. That said, falling back 6 positions from where he started this race off, so not exactly where he wants to be, but McRae has come back from less, and we have a slow car on the speedway. That's the 37 of Art Hendren coming out of pit lane. Still a bit of damage on that late model, but looks like Hendren decided that it was enough to justify coming back out on the track and see if he can't pick up a couple of more laps under his belt. After all, more practice always good for heading into the next race, and you never know when the big one might happen, and you might be able to pick up a couple of spots that way. So 11 laps down, for Art Hendren, but not out of this race by any means. A little bit further up, Jonathan Emerson getting a little bit of pressure from behind by Will Salomon. Salomon in that Piggly Wiggly entry, a driver that we saw having battles up in the front of the pack last week back at the Irwindale Speedway. Currently he's being scored back in the 12th position, trying to see if he can't break his way back up into the top 10, and he has a bit of work cut out for him in that number 72. Emerson and McRae, both drivers that have had a lot of speed under their belts this season. So far, McRae did manage to pick up a win. Emerson not so lucky, but Emerson, a driver that has been fairly consistently battling in the top 5 just about all season, so a little uncharacteristic to see him back here outside of the top 10, but with drivers like McRae and Salomon around him, you never know just what might happen. But Salomon going to have a bit of a scrape against the outside wall there, so not going to be the first time we see that, and definitely not going to be the last time we see that either. A little bit further up as well, Joshua Dube having a mirror full of McRae. McRae really starting to put the pressure on that number 9 machine, and as Dube goes up high, might be trying to see if McRae can get the pass, and sure enough, McRae's going to be trying to do it. Got the nose down under him. Sometimes that's all you need. Side by side through turns 3 and 4, a little bit of door-to-door contact, still side by side, heading down into turn number 3, and that 9 car is going to get just a little bit loose, and that's all it's going to take for McRae to make the pass. But now McRae has a little bit of his own problem just behind him. That 9 of Dube and the 23 of Emerson are teammates, and surely they're probably going to work together to get those spots back from the 99. And we have shown that these drivers in these Hale trailer race cars, that 9, that 23, and the 12 of Kenny Tripp, are really good at working together. So McRae has his work cut out for him, because his teammate currently is all the way up in position number 3, not really anywhere where Suka can do much to help him out here. 33 laps in the books, more drivers scraping up against the outside wall, pretty much happening every single lap, which is bound to be expected at a short track like this. You make even the slightest little bit of a mistake, and it is basically bound to happen. But it looks like trouble. Caution flag is out. It looks like potentially trouble for Gerard Lawrence and the 63 of, I believe that is Joe Campbell. Sure enough, Joe Campbell having some issues in that 63, and it looks like maybe some other drivers involved. Not too sure about that. That is a beat up looking 27 though. So let's take a look back and see what happened to these drivers. Looks like heading down into turns 3 and 4, Lawrence just behind that 63 of Joe Campbell. Lawrence going to look to try and make the pass. Campbell gets up into the wall, and both cars go spinning. And a lot of smoke pouring out of that number 27 machine. We could be looking at a motor that is on the verge of expiring. Yeah, that is not healthy for that number 27 machine. Let's see if we can't take a look back and get another view of that. Looking at that number 63, looks like coming out of turn 4, just the slightest little bit of contact against the outside wall is going to cause a little bit of problems, and just nowhere that 27 could really go of Gerard Lawrence. Let's see if we can't break out our chopper camera here. Been a little bit of a while since we've used this one, but nice of us, or nice of Hickory Motor Speedway to be loaning a chopper camera for us. Sure enough, just that slightest little bit of contact, enough to get the 63 way off the pace, and just nowhere Lawrence could really go. So definitely an unfortunate situation for both those drivers. That's going to be pulling out caution number 2 on lap 34 of this 225 lap event. So heading back to real time, looks like a couple of drivers making the choice to go down pit lane. Kiger, Sukup, Tripp, McRae, Max, pretty much looking like every driver on the field except for the 55 of Albert Hewins has made a stop down on pit lane. Definitely going to be interesting to see how this strategy plays out. Generally, you don't want to be the one car by yourself that has not done a pit stop, but potentially this could work out in the favor of Hewins. After all, we are still fairly early on in this race, so things could go in the favor for that number 55 machine. That said, it does not look like he is being scored as the race leader. Potentially, I don't think he was a lap down, but despite the fact he hasn't pitted, he's currently being scored back in the 8th position. So it could be just that the pit stops here are so short that some of these drivers managed to stay up in front of a car that stayed out. We're going to have to get the word from race control we are stacking them up 2 by 2, so it looks like we are good to go racing again. Sure enough, Brandon Kiger being scored as our race leader with Mike Sukup in P number 2. Both these drivers came down on pit lane. So it looks like maybe a little bit of a scoring error. But regardless, green flag back up in the air once again. And a little bit of a wobble for Tyler McRae. McRae certainly happy to see himself up into P number 4 there, because now he has his teammate together to work with. Both those drop and bomb entries nose to tail. Gonna be interesting to see what these two are able to do together to potentially try and push their way up to the lead. That said, they got to get around that 12 of Kenny Tripp and trouble. That's the 66 of Brent Mex around, and it's the 9 of Joshua Dube as well, and looks like that might have been the 126 of John Friley involved as well, back on lap 44. So at least 3 cars involved there, potentially 4. Gonna have to get a better look back at that one to see what exactly happened. Currently looking back at Joshua Dube here in that number 9 machine. It looks like the trouble potentially started with Mex. But no, sure enough, it looks like the 9 got a little bit of the rear end of Mex, and that's going to send him around, and a little bit of a touch to that 126 entry of John Friley. Not a hard one, though. Let's see if we can't get a better look back at what happened there, because the infield campers were in the way just a little bit. Sure enough, head down to turn number 3, just a little bit of a nudge from the number 9. That's going to actually involve the 28 just a bit, but the 9's going to go around, going to collect the 126, as well as, I think that was the 55 of Albert Hewins that might have gotten a little bit of contact there as well. Not quite sure on which driver that was, but definitely an unfortunate situation for everyone involved. Going to be caution number 3. We're going to get one last look at that, and yep, 28.966. And sure enough, the 55 of Albert Hewins and the 126 of John Friley both going to get a little bit of contact from that number 9 machine. So, under caution yet again, Brandon Kiger still being scored as our race leader, but Kenny Tripp did manage to gain a spot. He's up in P number 2 now. Sukup and McRae going to be lining up side by side, though. Both those Drop and Bombs Racing teammates going to be together on this restart. And sure enough, we are going to start getting our drivers waved around the speedway. Looks like Joe Campbell, Albert Hewins. No, Albert Hewins was down on pit lane. So was Joshua Dube. So it looks like Joe Campbell, Jonathan Emerson, and the 37 of Art Hendren, it looks like, are going to be the drivers getting the wave around. Stacking them up this time by, though, so the pace car should turn its lights off when we cross the line this time by. And then we will be one to go. Sure enough, that is the case. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car. Going to be racking them up again, and then going to be seeing if we can't try this one again. Will be 50 laps completed when we go green flag racing yet again. So still a ways to go in this race. Not even a quarter of the way through it. Still plenty of time for these drivers to negotiate their way around each other. But green flag back up in the air. Kiger having a pretty solid start, but Tripp trying his best to cycle it down onto the inside early on, and it looks like it did manage to work out for him, but got 2 Drop and Bombs drivers just behind him. McRae going to be going way up high, a little bit of scrape against the wall. And now that America's Navy entry of Jason Branch going to be making his way up here into this battle for the race lead. Jason Branch up a couple of positions from where we saw him earlier. It looks like he might have gained a little bit of ground on the last pit cycle, but he's going to go up high, get a little bit loose, and that's going to allow Salomon to get the nose up under him. That said, Salomon not actually holding on to the position. Sure enough, not going to be able to clear that 28 of Jason Branch. but he's going to be trying it again, looking to see if he can't get below that America's Navy entry, but he's just not able to get the run he's looking for. It looks like maybe the inside line, not the best place to be on this speedway anymore. Because you can see that 72, he's trying all sorts of different positions here on this track, and it's just not really working out for him. That said, Branch having a scrape against the outside wall, definitely a sight for sore eyes for Will Salamone, but it's not going to be enough to allow him to catch up even still in that number 72 machine. Up in the front, things still mighty spicy between our top three drivers. Throw them all under a blanket. 5 tenths, call it more like 4 tenths between P3 and the race leader. These three drivers all really pushing these cars with everything they've got. Gonna be 58 laps in the books this time by, so still really not that far into this race, but they're still battling like there's only, you know, a good 30-40 laps left. Sukup really trying to see if he can't figure a way to get himself around Tripp. He was up in P2 earlier on in this race, but now he's just not having a very good time trying to get around that 12 machine. You can see him even trying to get down on the apron just a little bit to really try and push this car and this track to its limits, but it's just not working out for him. And for the most part, the apron, not where you want to be on this track. It's a very easy way to make your car all sorts of unstable, and at best might slow you down a bit. At worst could risk making you spin out if you're not able to keep that car down under you. Little tiny bit of a tap by that 45 machine, and sure enough, Tripp's going to be going up high and Sukup's going to get the pass, and McRae might be looking to try and capitalize on that as well. Not going to happen though. Tripp immediately diving it back down to the inside line to block McRae from making the pass as well. And it worked out for him, only losing one position. McRae really gunning to try and get that 12 machine though. Peeking down to the inside, down the backstretch, going to back out of the pass, not committing to it. And now as we head down the front stretch, a little bit of a scrape against the wall for Salamone. Still trying to get around that America's Navy entry. Not a whole lot different from where he was at the beginning of this initial restart. Potentially a little bit of trouble. We got a call that Tommy Mitchell is off the track. He's going again, but cars scrambling to get around that slow late model, and a little bit of trouble. That's going to knock the, I believe that was the 12 of Kenny Tripp up into the outside wall. A little bit of damage to the front end of Tripp. No caution going to come out as the cars are all still rolling, but that definitely threw a wrench in these lead lap cars' plans. They did not see that one coming, and sure enough, a little bit of damage from the crossfire applied to that 12 of Kenny Tripp. A little bit further up, you can see everyone up in the front a little bit jumbled up, a little bit scrambled around from that slow crush entry. And sure enough, Mike Sukup is going to be our new race leader. Brandon Kiger back in P number 2, and Tyler McRae making his way up into the 3rd position. So that incident managed to completely jumble up our top 5 and put a new driver up in the front of this race. The question is, will he be able to hold on to it? I would imagine that he was not expecting to be put up here just as much as the previous race leader was not expecting to having to check up for a car stopped on the speedway. But one way or another, everyone is beginning to get themselves sorted out. That 9 of Joshua Dube going to be ending up being scored a lap down with, as well as Mitchell and the 26 of Johnny B. So if a caution were to come out right now, those 3 drivers would all be put back on the lead lap, as here with the Palm Series, it is not 1 lucky dog per caution, but rather 3 lucky dogs. So not the end of the world for these 3 drivers. They definitely still have potential to end up back in this race. Sukup having a little bit of a trouble there. Getting way down low on the apron. I think perhaps a bit lower than was actually intentional, because you could see him have to check up just a little bit to keep that car down under him. And look what is in front of that number 45. There are lapped cars potentially going to be shaking up the front of this race. That is the 27 of Gerard Lawrence, as well as the 37 of Art Hendren, and I believe, sure enough, that 26 of Johnny B is in there as well. So these three cars all potentially going to be throwing a wrench in Sukup's operation. Lawrence going to pull it way up high and just allow him by, but now there's two more cars that he has to work his way around, and these two cars are cars that are battling for position. Johnny B and Mr. Or no, never mind, Art Hendren not battling for position with Johnny B. I was mistaken on which car is up there in front of them. So Johnny B going to be going up high, letting Sukup around as well, and now he just has to get around that 37 of Art Hendren, and then he has a clear racetrack up in front of him. You can see further back Brandon Kiger, Tyler McRae, and Jason Branch all getting around that lap car as well without really any amount of trouble. Sure enough, Art Hendren also going to be pulling it up high and letting these lead lap cars past. A little bit further back in the field, Brent Meck starting to catch up to Joe Campbell in that 63 machine, trying to see if he can't make the position to get himself inside the top 10. This battle currently back for the, actually call that the 9th position. Both the drivers are in the top 10, but Meck's looking to see if he can't get himself in a position better than 10th place. Just behind him, Josh O'Doob in that number 9 machine, currently being scored a lap down after that incident earlier on in the race, and potentially trouble on the speedway. That's a car around. That is the number 6 of Tommy Mitchell in that Chevrolet Grape Crush entry. He's going to get it rolling here again. No caution going to come out, as he was able to keep that car rolling in the right direction. Definitely unfortunate for Tommy Mitchell. His second spin in just the last couple of laps. Little bit of damage on that number 6 machine that could definitely have a bit of potential to be messing up the handling of that late model stock car. Currently, Mitchell is being scored back in the 14th position, 2 laps down. A little bit further up the field, trouble as Salomon scrapes the outside wall. Jonathan Emerson diving it way down low, and he's going to make the pass on that number 72 machine. Salomon being bumped back to the 7th position just like that. Just behind them, that 27 car not battling for position. He's currently being scored 31 laps down after that heavy incident earlier on in this race, but he's got the car back out on the speedway. Still looking to see if he can't get some extra experience under his belt and potentially pick up some positions if a wreck were to occur. But definitely not where that 27 wants to be, considering he was leading the point standings coming into this race. And now the second place driver in the point standings, Mr. Kenny Tripp, is being scored in the top 5 in that number 12 machine. So potentially a little bit of a dire circumstance for Mr. Lawrence. We could potentially see a change of hands for the championship lead at the end of this race if things continue to play out the way they are going. But still, 91 laps in the books, plenty of times for things to get shaken up as more drivers scrape the front stretch wall. We'll just have to keep an eye on things and see how it all plays out. A little bit further back, John Friley having a bit of trouble. He's getting passed up by a couple of cars, and caution flag is out, and there's trouble in turn number 1. Drivers having to swerve to avoid that number 6 Grape Crush Chevrolet of Tommy Mitchell. That's going to bring out caution number 4. Let's see if we can't take a look back here and see just what happened, because that was a really unexpected for a lot of these drivers. A lot of drivers having to swerve out of the way to try and avoid that number 6. Sure enough, stuck up on the high side, potentially getting into the marbles there, and he's going to go around and going to roll it back a bit. That's going to collect that 126 of Art Hendren, and I believe also, or the 126 of John Friley, and I believe also involved was the 63 of Joe Campbell. But let's see if we can't get a better view of what just happened there. Let's ride on board with Joe Campbell heading into that wreck. Riding on board with the 63 machine, heading down into turns 3 and 4. You can see that 6 machine up on the high line gets a little bit loose, and just not a whole lot he can do. He tried to slam on the brakes, he tried to swerve out of the way, and it did not work for him in that number 63 machine. And you can see a whole lot of damage on that right front. That is going to have some pretty significant impacts on the rest of this race for Mr. Joe Campbell. So looking back out on the speedway, we do have a couple of takers down on pit lane. That's the 37 of Art Hendren you see pitting out now. Mike Sukup and Tyler McRae being scored as your race leaders here tonight. Teammates lining it up, P1 and P2. Drivers getting their wave arounds now. That is the night of Joshua Dube, the 35 of Art Hendren, or 37 of Art Hendren, and I believe Joe Campbell is going to be the third one to be getting a wave around here once the rest of the cars get themselves sorted out. Sure enough, Joe Campbell going to be going around the pace car in that 63. He's going to be getting put back up on the lead lap as well. You can see massive damage on that right front, though. That could really screw up things for that 63 machine. That's going to be hard to control, especially at these tight corners here at the Hickory Motor Speedway. Sacking them back up behind the pace car, though. It's looking like we should be having, looks like 98 laps completed when we go green flag racing again, so we will be restarting on lap 99 out of 225. Definitely going to be exciting to see what these drivers have in store for each other. McRae and Sukup likely going to be trying their best to work together to hold on to the lead of this race together and get a really strong finish for Dropping Bombs Racing. Let's see what these drivers have to give each other. Green flag back up in the air, and we are green flag racing here again at the Hickory Motor Speedway. And sure enough, Sukup and McRae immediately getting themselves sorted out, but just behind them there are cars all over the speedway trying every which line. Brandon Kiger going to be going low around Jason Branch, and Emerson going to try and follow in his footsteps and utilize that 28 being stuck up to the high side to get a little bit of a free position on the restart. That said, Branch not giving up that easily. The high line, for the most part, not where you want to be, but he's still trying with all his might in that America's Navy entry to try and keep the car up in front of Emerson. Sure enough, he's going to do it, going to get himself back down onto the low line. That is going to be things all done and sorted away for Jason Branch on that restart. Bit of contact further behind, though. That's Joshua Dube, Albert Hewins, and Will Salamone all duking it out. Currently that 9 of Dube stuck up to the high sign just a little, but he's going to try the crossover, going to try and see if he can't switch it up and dive it down on the 72. Not going to work, though. You can see a little bit of damage to the right rear of that number 9 machine. That is not doing him any favors here tonight. And just behind him, Brent Mex really putting the pressure on as well. Dube up 4 positions from where he qualified, though. So Dube, despite the damage, not having a bad run here tonight. Looking to see potentially if he can't get that number 9 machine up into the top 5. Currently, Dube is being scored back into the 4th position in the overall championship standing. So Doob could use a good run under his belt to potentially bump his way up above Brandon Kiger, but Kiger currently up in P number 3. Kiger won last week's race back at the Arwindale Speedway, putting him up into the 3rd position in the championship standings. He is looking to get another really solid finish in that number 85 machine. Could potentially even be enough to bump him up into 2nd overall and bump Kenny Tripp down a position depending on where Tripp finishes. Tripp currently being scored back into the 10th position in that number 12 machine, so he has a bit of ground to make up if he wants to stay in front of Kiger heading into 2023. As I said earlier, this is the last race of 2022 for these drivers. Going to be taking a couple weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. We will be back racing January 11th for round 8 of the season, so a little bit of time off to celebrate the holidays and potentially get some extra practice in for the next event, but still plenty of exciting racing left to go for these drivers. A little straight against the wall for Kenny Tripp there. The driver we were just talking about, he needs some extra spots if he wants to hold on to the position in front of Tripp in the standings. Side by side across the line though, that's the 9 and the 28 of Branch and Doob. These two drivers banging each other door to door. And it looks like Doob's going to get pushed up into the wall a bit in that 66. Brent Meck's going to see if he can't try and capitalize on that little bit of a battle as well. Sure enough, he is. Doob falling down 2 positions just like that. And potentially, Doob may not be happy about what just happened. Jason Branch sending him just a bit up into the outside wall. You can see a little bit of damage on the right side of that number 9 car. Sending it down low on the apron to try and see if he can't get any sort of ground on that 66 of Brent Mex, but does not look like it is working out for him. But Mex getting loose, and a bump from the 9. Joshua Doob having to slam on the brakes to keep from spinning Mex entirely, and that's going to allow his teammate of Tripp to get around him. Doob now down another 2 positions from when we started talking about him just a couple of laps ago. That 9 driver really not having a good time right this moment. Currently being scored back in the 10th position, so still in the top 10, but top 5 is what he was aiming for, and with how things just played out, he's now got a whole lot more work on his plate to try and get it to work. That said, looking to try and get around that 66 of Brent Mex. Mex being stuck up to the high side in that 66, and still side by side down the front stretch, but it looks like that 9 is going to make the pass, and caution flag is out. We've got a driver around. Looks like that might be for Art Hendren in that 37 machine. Little bit of damage on the front of that late model, but I'm not seeing any cars stopped on the track anywhere. So let's see if we can't take a look back and see what exactly prompted this yellow flag. So jumping back to lap 106, it looks like our camera crews are saying something happened to Art Hendren. Sure enough, getting loose, spinning it around, ending it up in the grass, and coming back out onto the speedway. And there's your race leaders. The caution going to be thrown just so that the leaders don't potentially rear end that 37 and have a repeat of what happened with Tommy Mitchell just a couple of laps ago. So that's going to be bringing out caution number 5. Just a little bit of a spin for Art Hendren. Ended up in the grass. You can actually, let's ride on board with our race leader at the time, Mr. Mike Sukup. Gonna break out the onboard camera for this one. The GoPro helmet camera on that number 45. Coming out of turn number 2, and sure enough, slow car on the speedway. Caution's gonna come out. Don't want to risk any of these full speed drivers potentially rear-ending Art Hendren there. So So that's going to bring out our next caution, and it looks like Jason Branch is going to be scored as our race leader here yet again. A couple of drivers taking it down to pit lane. Looks like Mike Sukup, Jonathan Emerson, Brandon Kiger, Tyler McRae. Pretty much everyone on the speedway except Jason Branch in the 28 and John Friley in the 126 came down pit lane that time by. So 2 new drivers making up the front row. Jason Branch up 7 positions from where he qualified. John Friley in the 126 up 12. Let's see what these 2 new race leaders are able to do. iRacing.com pace car is off. Let's see what happens. Green flag up in the air. Little bit of a slow start on that outside line. John Friley going way high through the corner, and that's going to allow Brandon Kiger to get the nose up under him. Potentially a little bit of a nudge, and just behind them, that 12 of Kenny Tripp and the 23 of Jonathan Emerson. 2 teammates duking it out, and you can see Tyler McRae further back there as well. McRae back into the 8th position. He lost a lot of ground on that pit stop. That's going to be putting him back into 6th place. John Friley falling back a couple of positions, now cycling himself down to the inside, but he was up in P number 2, now all the way back to 7th in just a matter of laps, and that just goes to show how important these restarts can be for some of these drivers. If you make a mistake, you could be going all the way back to the back if the cards don't fall in your favor. A little bit further up, a little bit of nudge between Salamone and McRae. McRae are really doing a whole good job of holding on to that position, but Salamone is all over right behind him, just trying to see whatever he can do to make the pass. Jason Branch getting overdriven in the corner just a little bit. He's going to be going way up high in that number 28. Not the end of the world, though, but now he's currently stuck up there as Will Salamone tries to make the pass. And if Salamone doesn't make this pass quickly, then John Friley's going to be able to get up there as well. In trouble. There's a car stop. That's Albert Hewins around, as well as John Friley and Jason Branch. That looked like it might have been potentially 2 separate incidents, kind of back to back. Let's see if we can't take a look back and see if we can't figure out what happened there. We're gonna take a jump back, and it's looking like we're gonna be looking at that 28 of Jason Branch coming through turns 3 and 4. Branch way up high, and Branch gonna have a hard impact with the outside wall. That's gonna collect the 126. Both those drivers going around. So sure enough, 2 separate incidents at the same corner in 2 entirely different parts of the field. Because along with that, Art Hendren also went, or not Art Hendren, excuse me, Albert Hewins in that 55 also went around there. Looking at that very chrome green and pink car, just a little bit of a nudge with the driver of the 66. That was Brent Mex. Not a hard impact for the 55. Nothing like what happened to Jason Branch and that 126 of John Friley, but still not a good incident for either of these drivers to endure. Let's take a quick look back there, right on the rear view camera of Jason Branch through that little bit of an incident. You can look back, see the rest of the field behind him, see that incident with the other cars. Just a hard impact, and not a whole lot Branch or John Friley could have really done there. So heading back up to the front of the speedway, Mike Sukup back into the race lead in that Drop and Bombs entry. The 85 Brandon Kiger, the Alpine Star entry, just going to be back in P number 2. Kiger been having an incredibly good run this evening. He was the race winner back at Irwindale and started off on the pole of tonight's event. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, so we're going to rack them up again, see what these drivers can do for the latter half of this race. We have crossed the halfway point about, call it about 15 laps ago. So, Sukup, Kiger, Tripp, McRae, Emerson making up your top 5. Green flag up in the air. Let's see what these drivers had to throw at each other for the latter half of this race. I would imagine we're not going to see punches pulled anymore. Already a little bit of bumping and bagging. Trouble for the 85. Going 3 wide down into turn number 3. Is it going to work out? Sure enough, it is. That 23 of Emerson falling back a bit. Potentially damage for that 23 because he was having a whole lot of trouble on that restart. He could just not get his car up to speed. Looks like it's all rolling a-okay for him now, but that restart just did not work out for him at all in that 23. Everyone rolling in the right direction, though. Going to be putting us on lap 145 when we cross the line. Kenny Tripp looking to try and make the pass, or Kiger looking to make the pass on Kenny Tripp. And sure enough, side by side down the backstretch, heading down into turns 3 and 4, and it looks like Kiger's going to be able to pull it off, and McRae going to try and sneak his way on in there and see if he can't make it work for him too. Looks like it is going to be working out still side by side, but McRae has the advantage. That 12 going way up high, and now all 3 teammates right next to each other, nose to tail. Tripp, Emerson, and Doob, all 3 of those drivers driving for the Hill trailer entry. All gonna see if they can't work together. No, very loose through the corner for that Piggly Wiggly entry. That's Will Salomon. He was sliding through turns number 3 and 4 and sliding again a little bit through 1 and 2. That's gonna knock him back a couple of positions in that Piggly Wiggly entry. Looks like he's got the car pointed in the right direction, but that last corner really did not work in his favor in that number 72 machine. Looking to see if he can't try and catch back up to Albert Hewins, who currently is the only driver on the speedway to currently be in the position they started the race in. Hewins started this race in 7, and he's still running up there in 7th, and sometimes running up in the position you started is not such a terrible thing, because honestly, you could be in Mr. Gerard Lawrence's position right now and be scored, call it about 60 laps down and 11 positions back from where he started. Tripp looking to see what he can do to get around McRae. Getting loose through the corner, though, that's going to cause him to fall back a pretty decent amount of room there in that 12 machine. Currently about half a second between these 2 drivers, and Tripp looked all set up to try and make a pass, but just a little bit of a wiggle sent him all the way back there. Potentially trouble for Jason Branch. Jason Branch looking like he's a bit off the pace. He just fell back a couple of positions. Does not look like he spun, but he might have gotten loose through the corner. Currently, he is back in the 11th position with Mr. Johnny B in the 26th, the last car on the lead lap. Being scored back in the 12th position, looking to see if he can't try and gain any spots. 150 laps in the books, though. Gonna be another 75 to go to round out this event here tonight at the Hickory Motor Speedway. Looks like everyone starting to play nice with each other for the time being. How long that lasts will remain to be seen. We know in the later stages of these races, drivers can start to get a little more acquainted with one another's bumpers, because it gets to the point where sometimes a little bit of a tap might be necessary to make a pass. Certainly not dumping the other driver. You don't want to be doing that, but a little bit of a nudge to let the driver know you're there and potentially get them a little bit loose sometimes is the necessary play to try and get around a driver in front of you, especially at these incredibly tight short tracks like this. Sure enough, Jason Brandt's going to be able to get a past Joe Campbell going way up high on the speedway. Campbell down 5 positions from where he started. Campbell was having a really solid run earlier on in this race, but unfortunately involved in a bit of an incident that's put a bit of damage on that 63. You can see the right front fender bent in just a bit. Does not look like it is damaging the tire at all, but not good for aerodynamics, and potentially a little bit of steering damage on that 63, going to be slowing him down and making the rest of the race a bit more difficult. Joshua Dube making the pass on Kenny Tripp. Tripp getting stuck up to the high side as well. That seems to be a trend. If you overdrive these corners at all and even just make the tiniest little bit of a mistake and you drift up the speedway, you're going to get passed by the car behind you, just the way it is. Tyler McRae having a bit of a scrape against the wall there in that dropping bombs entry. Back up into P number 3. Sure enough, the dropping bombs racing team making up 2 of the 3 spots in the podium, with Brandon Kiger in a little bit of a sandwich between these two right now, but our top 3 all spread out a decent bit. Mike Sukup's built up a 1.6 second lead over Brandon Kiger. Another caution coming out could potentially mess things up for him, but we could even potentially see another pit cycle play out. Currently, most of the drivers on this field have pit either 3 or 4 times. Looks like trouble. Jason Branch is around. He's able to get that car going, and it does not look like we will be getting a caution for that, but that's going to send Jason Branch all the way back to the back. Going to be the last car on the lead lap, and that's Mike Sukup right behind him, and scratch that. Jason Branch no longer on the lead lap, just like that. While we have a quick second, let's take a quick look back and see what happened to Branch here. Sure enough, just heading down to turns 1 and 2, got a little bit loose, spun around, ended up in the grass, a little bit of a nudge against the inside wall, able to get going quick enough not to necessitate the need for a yellow flag. So that's going to be knocking Jason Branch down to the first car a lap down. He should be able to get that spot back. If the caution comes out, he will be put back on the lead lap. And it looks like he will be the only car put back on the lead lap, because Brent Mex, multiple laps down, he's not going to get the wave around multiple times. But if we do somehow end up with 2 cautions, then not the end of the road for Mex. We will just have to see how the remainder of this race plays out. Back in P number 7, Albert Hewins trying to catch up to Jonathan Emerson in that number 55 machine, setting some decent lap times. He actually, that time by, set a faster lap time than Emerson and Kenny Tripp, 2 drivers in front of him on the speedway. So Hewins having some pretty decent speed under that race car, and yet again set a faster lap time than Emerson. It looks like that's being reflected by what we're seeing in the race. Hewins is closing the gap and potentially going to start setting up for a pass in the next couple of laps if he is able to do so. He does have to worry about that 72 of Will Salamone behind him, but a decent bit of a gap between the two, probably enough to not really have to worry about, at least for the time being. And trouble for Kenny Tripp. Kenny Tripp getting really loose, really squirrely, going to be going up to the high line. And that 23 of Jonathan Emerson looking to see if he can't use that opportunity to get around his teammate, but it does not look like it's going to work out for him. That bit of a wiggle by Tripp is going to check up these 4 now, and suddenly there's a lot more pressure on Albert Hewins from Will Salamone, because Salamone was about three quarters of a second behind Hewins, and now just barely below half a second. So Salamone's starting to fall back again, but for just a brief moment there, they were all pretty much nose to tail. And I mean, they basically still are. A little bit of a gap between all of them, but not all that much. Emerson really trying his best to just hold on and potentially defend from Hewins. Going to be going down on the apron a bit there. Not sure if that was intentional by the driver of the 23, but that's not doing him any favors. That is going to slow him down just a little bit. And sure enough, Hewins right behind him now. But as long as Emerson locks down that low line, there's not a whole lot Hewins is going to be able to do without either just being patient and waiting for Emerson to make a mistake, which is something that I personally would not be banking on, or potentially might have to use a little bit of the chrome horn and give him a little bit of a bump. But never mind, he's going to get really loose. He's going to go down the apron, and that's going to cause him to spin able to recover, but that's going to allow Salomon to get past and make him go almost a full second back from the cars that he was just battling with. Further up in the field, Sukup and Kiger, well, Sukup in particular has a really good lead. McRae trying to catch up to Kiger, but 0.4 of a second between the two of them. And Emerson's going to get around Tripp. It looks like Tripp, once again, finding himself stuck up to the high line in that number 12 machine. Going to lose a spot to his teammate, but still time, and it looks like trouble. Joe Campbell is around, and that's going to bring out the 7th caution of the evening in that number 63 machine. Immediately, Campbell's going to be pulling it down to pit lane in that 63. Let's see if we can't take a look back here, see what caused that 7th caution of the evening for that number 63 driver. Heading down into turns 1 and 2. Race leader right behind him. And it looks like he's just going to get turned by that 45, just right around that. That's going to be the 45 of Mike Sukup he made contact with, who was the race leader at the current time. Let's see if we can't take another look back at that. 45 heading down to the inside of the track, looking to try and get around that 63, and just like that, a little bit of nudge to the left rear, and that's going to send the 63 spinning around in front of the rest of the race leaders. And smoke lightly coming out of the back of that 63. That could be the end of the race for Joe Campbell. Let's take one more quick look back at that. Maybe ride on board with Mike Sukup and see what he saw going into there. Riding on board the nose camera of Mike Sukup's number 45 dropping bombs entry. Coming out of turn number 2, and just a little bit of a nudge. And then a second one right after it. That's going to send the 63 hard impact into the inside wall here tonight at the Hickory Motor Speedway. And heading back to the live camera, sure enough, that 63 of Joe Campbell is down on pit lane, and it looks like he has some fairly serious damage on that late model stock car. And sure enough, it looks like most of the rest of the field came down pit lane again. Looks like the 12 of Kenny Tripp, and also looks like potentially that might have been Will Salomon stayed out of the pit lane, so they're both going to get the wave around, put back in front of the pace car, and Tyler McRae going to be scored as our new race leader. Mike Sukup all the way back down into the 7th position, though. It looks like Sukup might have had some trouble either on pit road or potentially getting a penalty for that incident, but he's going to be knocked from the lead of this race all the way back to P number 6. And there's the 29, that America's Navy entry, as well as Will Salomon and Brent Mex both getting put back on the lead lap. Looks like potentially a little bit of confusion down on the track on where drivers are supposed to be lining up right now. Mike Sukup now up in P number 6, and let's take a look at the pace car. Lights still on, so we're not official on where drivers should be lined up right now. Drivers still getting themselves sorted out just a bit. Mike Sukup pulling it up high. It does look like the driver of that 45 may be getting a penalty for that incident. And just like that, lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, so race control has given the green light. Everyone is in their correct positions now. Tyler McRae, Jonathan Emerson going to be making up the front row of this event. Heading down to turn number 3, iRacing.com pace car going to be pulling down to the safety of pit lane for the 8th time tonight. Green flag up in the air. Tyler McRae having a great start, but just behind them, cars side by side. A little bit of a nudge by Brandon Kiger. Kiger bumping That 9 of Joshua Dube up to the high line, not going to be enough to make the pass happen, but definitely letting the driver of that Hill trailer entry know that he is there and he is looking to get up in the front of this race. He made another nudge into turns 1 and 2, really trying to get around that number 9 machine. Call it about 35 laps left to go. This is when the gloves are coming off. This is when these drivers are going to be throwing everything they have at each other to try and make any sort of ground, because they are running out of time to do it incredibly quickly here tonight. That said, Brandon Kiger falling back just a little bit. For all the nudging he tried to do to Joshua Dube, it does not look like it actually did much to help him out there. Jonathan Emerson just up ahead. Call it about 0.3 of a second behind Tyler McRae. Still in contention for the race lead as we cross the line, putting us on lap 192. Clock is certainly ticking for these drivers. McRae currently being scored back into the 13th position overall in the championship standings. A second win under his belt could be a massive boon for the driver of that number 99, but he's just have to hold on to it for the next 31 or so laps. Emerson not going to make it easy for him though. Joshua Dube, another driver that's not going to be making his work easy for him. These two drivers both have shown they have the speed to try and get a win here tonight, and both of them definitely going to be trying to make this race be the one where they get to etch their names in the record books. A little bit further back, John Friley and Mike Sukup battling it out just a little bit. Sukup back into the 7th position, a little bit of scrape against the outside wall there. Sukup, despite being given that EOL, still putting down some really impressive lap times. Mike Sukup was the fastest car on the speedway last time by. And it looks like, again, fastest car on the speedway by several thousandths of a second. So that 45 is setting down some incredibly impressive lap times here tonight. Will it be enough to get back up to the front of this race? Remains to be seen, though. Passing another 6 cars is not going to be any easy feat for that 45, especially with only 26 laps to go. Just in front of him, though, Kenny Tripp getting really loose off the corner, able to hold on to it, but that car was a little bit sideways down the front stretch. That's going to make Sukup his job just a little bit easier, especially as these cars up in the front of the field keep scraping against the outside wall. They're really pushing as hard as they can, and they're not afraid to get a little bit of damage picked up in order to make the passes happen. Both Tripp and Sukup catching up to Albert Hewins a little bit. Sukup scraping the outside wall just a little bit. And a driver getting loose, that's Brandon Kiger. He was sideways through turn number 2. Got it pointed the right way again, but that's going to allow the rest of the cars just behind him to catch up without much difficulty. Albert Hewins closing the gap, but Kenny Tripp and Mike Sukup also respectively closing their gaps on one another. 23 laps to go, and both Sukup and Kiger scrape the outside wall. Sukup looks down to the low side trying to get around Kenny Tripp. Gonna back out of it. He's gonna side. No, that's not going to be the corner to do it, but with only 22 laps to go, he's running out of opportunities to try and make these passes in that number 45 machine. Not a lot of time left to go, but sure enough, yellow flag gonna come out. Jason Branch stopped down in turn number 4. That's going to be caution number 8 with only 21 laps to go. Looks like we're going to be having a bit of a shootout for the finish here tonight, folks. This is going to be crazy one way or another. But before we get to that, let's take a look back, see what happened to that America's Navy entry, the driver out of Virginia Beach. Heading down the backstretch, looking all good right about now. Down into turn 3, little bit sideways, especially coming through turn number 4, and just going to park it down at the end of turn number 4 and going to pull it forward up against the outside wall, not wanting to risk impacting any of these race leaders in that number 28 machine. So definitely the sportsmanlike call by that 28 to try and get the car out of the way, even if he wasn't able to get it refired, at least get it out of the way and not potentially hit these race leaders. Right on board with Jason Branch here, riding on the helmet cam, just heading down into turn number 3 and getting a little bit loose. And once that car goes sideways, there's not a lot you can do to get it to stop. So we're back out on the speedway. Tyler McRae still being scored as your race leader. Looks like Albert Hewen's going to be coming down to pit lane. Going to be, looks like, the only driver on the lead lap of this race that is coming down to pit lane right now in that number 55. Currently being scored down in the 9th position. Going to be making that 10th, 11th, and yeah, just back to 11th. So that 55 taking tires, going to be the last car on the lead lap in the 55 machine. We're going to have to see how it works out for him. He is the only driver taking tires on this caution. So if this works out in his favor, this could be an incredibly massive play by Hewens. After all, already was back in, I believe, the 9th position. So he only lost 2 spots from that pit stop. And green flag back up in the air. 16 laps to go. Tyler McRae still in the race lead without much issue, but a huge gaggle of cars just behind him. 3 wide down the backstretch. Never mind. Tripp going to back out of it. Those 3 Hale trailer teammates all duking it out. 3 wide yet again. Mike Sukup down on the inside. Brandon Kiger getting involved in the middle again. Everyone negotiates it fairly cleanly, but it's like I said, this is going to be one crazy shootout to try and pick up the win here tonight. Driver into the outside wall, that's Jonathan Emerson. Still got that car rolling in the right direction, but that is going to cost him a couple of positions. Everyone's starting to single file out just a little bit. We'll have to see how long that actually lasts, because there's not a whole lot of time left for these drivers to try and be patient, and especially someone like Mike Sukup, who had to go back to the back of the field and has now climbed his way all the way back up here. He is not going to be holding any punches on these drivers. Kenny Tripp drifting up high. That's going to allow Brandon Kiger to pull up alongside him. That 45 of Mike Sukup going to dive it down low, see if he can't capitalize on it as well, and sure enough, looks like it might work out for that 45, at least able to keep him pushed up to the high line and not able to close the door. Sure enough, that 12 going to let out the gas to let the 45 by and see if he can't just dive it back down onto the inside. And caution flag out yet again. That's going to be caution number 9. John Friley around, and it looks like Albert Hewens as well, potentially, in that 55. Albert Hewens was the only driver on that pit stop to take tires, and it looks like potentially the strategy did not work out for him. Let's take a look back to see what happened to bring out caution number 9 here tonight. Looking at that 126 Camel entry heading out of turn number 2 down the backstretch. Looks like Hewens just tried to dive it down low and it did not work out, collecting that 55 and the 126. The 126, nothing Friley could have really done to avoid that. Albert Hewens just sent it in low, trying to utilize those new tires that he took on that pit stop, and it did not work out for him in that 55 machine. Just trying to make the pass, sticking the nose down there. That 72, amazing heads-up driving by that 72 of Will Salamone, getting a little bit loose on the grass, but for the most part, keeping it pointed in the right direction. Let's take a look back and look at that from Salamone's perspective here. Riding on board with him. He did some very impressive moves to try and keep himself out of that wreck. He saw it coming, and he immediately drove it down onto the grass, getting a little bit loose. but it was the right call to avoid that incident and keep himself up inside the top 10. So now, going to be 6 laps to go. Lights off on the iRacing.com pace car already, so it looks like potentially a bit of a short caution for these drivers. Going to be calling it a 5-lap shootout when we go green flag racing yet again. These drivers going to be throwing every last thing they have at each other. Green flag up in the air. Potentially a bit of a slow start on the outside by Joshua Dube and the rest of that outside line. Everyone immediately trying to file their way down to the inside line no matter what. Tyler McRae holding on to the front of this race, but he's getting loose, and Kiger really trying to do anything he can to make this pass. And Kiger's going to turn to McRae, and that's going to check up the whole front of the field. Caution number 10 going to come out. And McRae somehow is holding on to the lead of this race. What a restart that was. Technically speaking, no one was actually involved in a wreck there, so we're gonna have to try and finagle the camera just a little bit to get a replay of what happened there. But heading down into turn number 2, Brandon Kiger diving it down deep to try and get around that 99. It's just not going to work out for him, and checking up the front of the field and sending it 4 wide, even if no one was really wrecked there. Not safe conditions for any of these drivers, so definitely the right call pulling that caution flag there. Let's see if we can't get another view of this. That 85 of Brandon Kiger just sending it down low, a little bit of nudge to the 99, and gonna actually get Tyler McRae pointed back in the right direction, and that 85 gonna bounce off the inside wall. No damage for Brandon Kiger, but definitely a scary incident for everyone involved here. But we're going to be racking them up again and trying that restart one more time. Just try and see if we can't get things working the way we need them to be. Tyler McRae still being scored as the leader of this race, and it looks like Kiger still going to be scored in P number 2, as by iRacing's automated standards, no one actually wrecked in that caution, so no one lost any positions, it looks like. So we're going to have to see, will these drivers be able to negotiate one another a little bit more gently on this restart? But let's be real here, race fans. Who am I kidding? We are heading into NASCAR overtime. Drivers are going to be throwing everything they have at each other, even more so than they did on that previous restart. Going to be stacking them up 2 by 2, it looks like. Lights off on the iRacing.com pace car. Normally we have a rule in effect where if there are back-to-back cautions, we restart in single file, but that is not the case here, because we also have a rule that if we go into overtime, the overtime restarts will be in double file no matter what. The single file rule does not take effect. So we're going to be stacking them up 2 by 2. We're going to be trying this thing again, and that 12 car rear-ending McRae just a bit, trying to potentially get a bit of a jump on the start. Everyone all over the place once again. Tyler McRae still holding on to the race lead, but Brandon Kiger trying to bump him, and that's going to send him up high. Mike Sukup also being involved. Cars stopped all over the speedway, and Kiger's around again. And there's a whole lot of cars all throughout the field that are wrecked here tonight. And it looks like that is going to be that. The race going to come to its conclusion. Race into the checkered flag. Tyler McRae is going to be our race winner here tonight. What a finish to this race here this evening. Gonna have to take a look back. I mean, of course, gotta celebrate McRae's finish, but I need to take a look back and see what happened. That was quite an instant to bring to the end of the race. I'll give McRae a minute to do his burnouts, but we got to take a look back at that incident before we do our interviews, because that was a wild finish to this race. Of course, we got to give a huge congratulations to the number 99 of Tyler McRae for picking up his 2nd win of the season here tonight. But now that that is all sorted out, let's take a quick look back at this incident before we go down and talk to our finishers. Brandon Kiger bumping into Tyler McRae, getting sent up way up high, getting into the outside wall, darn near flipping the thing, and he's going to go spin around, and that's John Friley and Jason Branch further up the field involved in that later incident, trying to avoid the 85 going around, and that's going to bring out the caution. Or, well, not bring out the caution because we didn't have a caution for the end of this race. So what a finish we had this evening. But before we go anywhere, looks like Mr. Tyler McRae is actually already up here ready for his interview. So let's see if we can't get a word with him. Mr. Tyler McRae, what a finish to this race, but here you are up here again, win number 2 under your belt. How are you feeling after whatever just happened in those past 15 laps?
I'm happy to bring the DBR car on the victory lane. I'm a little disappointed Mike Sukup didn't get up here. I was rooting for him. He ran a heck of a race. Very smart race, strong race. And it was unfortunate what happened with him in the 63 car. I think it was avoidable, honestly, because I'm his teammate and I'm going to call him out and I want him to call me out too because he had such a lead. But, the other thing I don't fault him for, he's been wrecked and pushed around a lot this season and he's kind of tired of it. So he's got a short fuse right now. I don't blame him. As soon as he gets pushed around a little bit, his fuse goes off. But unfortunately, it cost him to win because he had a strong car and was running a really good race. I was so proud of him.
Yeah, both the drop-in bombs race and entries tonight were running amazing races, and while it is definitely unfortunate for Sukup, it is still good for y'all's team that at least one of y'all managed to bring it home into victory lane here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy. You say I got a little burnout, little feuds going on. So I guess I'll bring it to the next race after a couple weeks off. Um, Happy for Kenny and Doob. I mean, him and Jonathan, they always end up front at some point, and they're hard competitors. I don't know what happened to Jonathan there at the end. He all of a sudden disappeared, so I didn't see it. Um, but yeah, those two guys are right there. Kenny gave me a little shock because I couldn't drive in the corner, but so hard in 3. But it was nice and square, so you can't fault that at all. So good, good luck driving to them and getting a second and third. It probably helped them in the points pretty good.
Yeah, sure enough, and a win for you is probably going to be bumping you up a couple of positions on the standings as well, so definitely a good race for a lot of these drivers. Now, we are going to be taking, I believe, 2 weeks off. It looks like our next race will be January 11th at Stafford. Is that a track you got any particular feelings about?
No, no feelings at all. It's a little tight track though in the corner, so it's kind of wild here. It might be similar to here where track position was very key. Keeping up with the tires because the last 3 cautions I didn't have tires to put on, so that's why you just stayed out there and let her eat.
Fair enough. Well, I certainly look forward to seeing what you and the rest of the Drop and Bomb stable are able to bring out to the track in a couple of weeks. And of course, thank you for coming out here tonight and running another amazing show. Before I send you off to go celebrate, though, is there anyone you'd like to thank on the side of that 99 machine for getting you up here?
Yeah, I definitely want to appreciate the league, for putting us on and they bringing us all together. Even though we're a little bumping and grinding, it is some good racing. They make the best calls they can, and I think they've been pretty darn fair. Also, want to appreciate you and your broadcast. I enjoy watching it too and seeing what I did wrong or good the next day. And the competitors, man, they all ran hard there at the end. Even though it's a few hurt feelings. I think majority of the race I kept my nose clean, so I try not to do that. But it was a little rough towards the end, but that was a fun time. And DBR and simspeedshop.com for being on the car, and Mike and all the guys, just having a good time with them. Appreciate them.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Tyler, and congratulations on your second win of the season.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And finishing back in P number 2, Going to be the 12 of Mr. Kenny Tripp up here on the podium yet again. It feels like I'm talking to you darn near every single week. How are you feeling now that everything's said and done here tonight? That was quite the race.
I'm feeling really good. Unfortunately, Gerald had a bad night, which I was able to capitalize on, and I thought I was going to be able to capitalize on another win. If but just didn't all go my way. Apparently, I didn't take enough time. I still have 2 sets left in the truck, so uh, everyone, my conversations, the rest of the guys, everyone's used all their tires. Well, I still had 2 sets, so apparently I didn't use enough tires. But all in all, good night. Got in a little damage early in the race and kind of battled back from that. Lap car kind of got in the way and kind of got in the wall a little bit. But other than that, it was a good race. Good, definitely a great points night, and that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah, definitely a solid run for you. And you say maybe you should have used more of your tires, but maybe the alternate pit strategy is part of what helped you get up there. You never know. And we've seen that pit strategy can be a major factor in these races. So I'd say, all things considered, that you put on a really great show here tonight. And I think, don't quote me on this because I'm not the one in charge doing the math, but I think you might be the new championship leader coming out of tonight.
I think you're correct, but it's not going to be by much.
Well, either way, a little bit of a new leader never hurts. We're going to be taking 2 weeks off, so we'll be coming back on January 11th, and our next race is going to be at Stafford Motor Speedway. That track you got any particular concerns about?
I'm not really a big fan of that track. Just stay out of trouble, and anything longer than a you know 3/8 mile, half mile is a little stretching it for me. But I'll do what I can. Probably probably won't see me in the top three, but I'll definitely shoot for a top five of that track.
That sounds like a solid plan. I certainly look forward to seeing you out there coming in the next couple of weeks, but before I send you off, there anyone you like to thank for getting that 12 machine up here on the podium yet again?
Yeah, I gotta thank Josh and Jonathan and Brandon. We all work together and seems to be doing well. But all in all, good night. Just like to thank the league for putting this on and you for broadcasting, and hope everyone has a Merry Christmas.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Kenny, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
And finally, back in third place, Mr. Joshua Dube. Looks like he pulled his car off the track, so we're going to have to pull up some B roll footage here, real quick. Let's see if we can't get something rolling for y'all here, real quick. There we go. Finally, back rounding out this podium here tonight, Mr. Joshua Dube. Always great seeing you up here again. How are you feeling, especially after that crazy last 15 laps? That was a heck of a race you all put on. How are you feeling now that everything's all said and done?
I was hoping that last 35, 40 laps to go green because, oh, yeah, well, I got chopped early in the race, got the UL, I had to go to the back. But not only that, not my wheels out of alignment, had a decent amount of damage, but I was able to get it all fixed. And I had two fairly fresh tires. Honestly, I believe at the end of that, if it would have went green, I would have been able to get up to the lead. But when those restarts, those cautions, and me starting second, you start on the outside of this track, and in the up front, you're going backwards 3 or 4 spots. So it was hectic at the end for sure.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like pretty much all lit race the outside line was having some trouble on these restarts, but either way, bringing it home P number 3, definitely a very solid finish for you here tonight. And it looks like Kiger finished back in the ninth position, so he finished a pretty decent amount of spots up ahead of him. I'm not sure if that's enough points for you to nudge him out of second in, or nudge him out of third in the championship or not, but still a
He
very
still got
solid
more
run.
points than me because of the heat and qualifying. He still ended up with more points because I got no points in the qualifying or heat.
Fair enough. Either way, heck of a run by you here tonight, and we will be taking 2 weeks off before we head to the Stafford Motor Speedway on January 11th. Is that a track you've got any particular concerns about?
I actually love Stafford. I went down there last year for the SRX race for the first time because I'm in Maine. It was only a 3 hour drive. And yeah, no, Stafford's an excellent track. I can't wait to go. That's going to be a lot of fun in these late models. That's going to be a great time.
That sounds like a good plan then. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing you out there. But before I let you go celebrate getting another podium under your belt, is there anyone you'd like to thank on the side of that number 9 machine for getting you up here?
Well, the thing Hill Trail is always it's pretty cool. We got second, third, and fourth. So all three of our cars in the top 5. We've all had to battle adversities there, come in with damage and drive our way back up through. And that was not an easy track. Like I said, I raced a VR, and my VR set is soaked. I am sweaty. That was a lot. It was harder than the workday today.
Yeah, that was quite the race. So I'll definitely let you go and celebrate now. Thank you, as always, for coming out and putting on a great race here tonight. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks out at Stafford.
Yeah, same here, man. Thanks as always for a great broadcast, and Matt and Steven for putting this on. It's been a really good league. Love this league. So it turned out to be my favorite league, I think, in the car.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I will see you in 2 weeks.
10-4, buddy.
And sure enough, there, race fans, you heard it from your top 3 finishers here tonight. Mr. Tyler McRae, Kenny Tripp, Joshua Dube, everyone putting on an amazing show here at the Hickory Motor Speedway here tonight. Definitely a fun one and about as hectic as I expected it to be, and definitely going to be having some points implications for some of these drivers. And that said, before we hand it off here for the evening, I'm going to pull up our race results for tonight's event. Of course, these are unofficial. These are subject to potentially being changed if penalties get handed out by race control for post-race stuff or anything like that. But as they ran here tonight, McRae, Tripp, and Dube, your top 3 finishers. Then back in P number 4, that 23 of Jonathan Emerson, followed by the 45 of Mike Sukup, rounding out your top 5. Back in 6, Will Salamone in the 72, with 7th going to Albert Hewins in the 55. 8th going back to Mr. Johnny B in the 26, with Brandon Kiger in the 85 back in 9th, and John Friley in the 126, rounding out the top 10. 11th going back to that 28 of Jason Branch, followed by the 66, of Brent Mex in 12th. 13th going to go back to Joe Campbell in the 63, followed by Art Hendren in the 37 in 14th. Back in 15th, rounding out the top 15, that's going to be Mr. Gerard Lawrence in the 27, the championship points leader up until this race, finishing back in the 15th position. Finally, rounding out this 17-car field here tonight, Tommy Mitchell in the 6, back in 16th, and Mr. Jeff Edgar in the 7, back in 17th. So, like we discussed just a little bit with our top 3 finishers here tonight, we will be taking 2 weeks off for the holidays before we get back racing again on January the 11th at the Stafford Motor Speedway. So, this will be the last you see of the Pro American Late Model Series for 2022. And of course, from all of us up here in the broadcast and everyone down in the Pro American Late Model Series, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to all of y'all race fans out there. Thank you all for tuning in and supporting the league, supporting the broadcast, and tuning in to some awesome racing action. Thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to seeing y'all in 2023. Have a good evening, race fans.